is if we look at a rule, and if I create a short spring length here and deflect it and release it, that's a store and release. So if I increase my spring length and bend it and release it, so the longer it is, the greater ability you've got there to store and then release energy. Now, if you look at the last bullet on that slide, it says if we double the thickness, treble the strength, which we might have to do for a heavier patient, then you lose the potential store. I spent Monday of this week in Loughborough doing a review with patients, and we're now in, what can we do before Tokyo or the games next year. What you kind of typically do with these blades is you have to set them up longer than the sound side, such that when they are in motion, then you've got that deflection. As soon as they put weight on it, then it's deflecting. When they run, it's deflecting more. So this spring length will shorten by a third or a half. So the compensation is to set them up longer. The unknown, and if there are engineers out there, I'm sure there are a few that will understand this better than me, and it would be interesting research, Sandy. This last bit here, just that whole dynamic of spring length. Are we better to stiffen, and are we going to get a better return, or do we go for something more flexible and longer? You will see, if you sort of see pictures, there's a French girl, Amélie, see her standing on a prosthesis. She's a below-knee amputee. She'll stand her hip and knee are at this angle, because that's how much longer the blade is than the sound side. Marcus Rem, who's a German long jumper, Greg Rutherford can jump 8 meters 50 below-knee amputee. And if you look at their technique, they're actually almost using the prosthesis as a pole vaulter would use their pole to lever themselves off. So technology, blades. A bit about sport. There has been quite a bit about sport today, and I wondered how my sport would fit in. Well, it kind of does, because I can see and I've heard where individuals have used it through their rehabilitation and continue to use it. And I think that's where it is. It is a very powerful tool. I was sort of lucky to work with patients into 2012, and then luckier to sort of work with more and to go out to Rio. And maybe just to sort of share an experience, I started working with this chap not that long ago, August last year, Richard Whitehead, who some of you will know. I'd known Richard on and off, and Richard has a congenital absence of both legs, so he's got something very short below the knee, but just remnants of his tibia, so he kneels in his sockets. He had the same prosthetist, Terry Stanley, at Nottingham for 30, 40 years, so Terry's the one that should really get the credit for Richard's achievements. It's nothing to do with me. But when I took Richard on, he was on sockets that he'd been on for 30 years, which were leather sockets in a carbon frame. And everyone knew they were falling apart, and there was the need to do something. So came to me, and I agreed, but only on the basis that Richard Hirons was going to help me out with the blades, and I was going to use probably Dorset to manufacture in pre-preg. And I was going to sit on my hands and just act as a consultant, because I just had so much on, I didn't want the responsibility. So that's where it started. Anyway, I didn't sit on my hands for long, I just got bored talking, so we got a bucket out and plaster out. Again, sorry. We took a pair of casts, we took some casts, and it was such an interesting journey. I would say genuinely scary, because I just had this guy that had run Land's End Joint Road, won gold medal, so 40 marathons, 40 days. Richard, what's wrong with your sockets? Why have we got to change it? This was a sort of process. I think this was October last year, and sort of aligning. What we were trying to do with our sockets was to create a tapered flexible socket out of laminate without leather inside it, to reduce the weight and improve the connection. These are trial days, and this is Guildford. This would have been sort of end of 2015. Anyway, we made a pair of sockets. That was the result.
That's not bad.
Which isn't bad. In saying it was scary, I could tell you a story about being in a taxi in the middle of a gunfight in Rio, which was scary. The scariest thing though was I flew out on Wednesday, and on Thursday morning I got a text from Richard and his coach saying there's noise and there's movement. We think there's a problem with the sockets. There were still 6 places that noise and movement could have been, and I was hoping and praying that it wasn't the lamination anchor which was in the socket. Those sockets were finished on the 20th of May. We're now the 8th of September, and his first heat is on the 9th. So I get into the athlete's village, and I'm looking at this leg for 20 minutes, hoping and praying that it's movement. Anyway, it turned out to be a worse scenario, that the lamination anchor was pulling out of the sockets. So I did a 20-hour shift in a workshop, and anyway, he qualified in his heat the following day and got a gold on the Sunday. So an interesting experience. Trends. What are the trends out there? There's this integrated limbs, which I would say my personal is I'm just quite scared by, really. I mean, it's not being a Luddite, it's not being sockets are the best way, it's just, I see it happening more and more, but see it and view it very much as still a clinical trial, not a proven technique, and I can see Raju's head nodding. Powered limbs, powered prosthesis. There's been a huge injection post-Afghanistan in upper limb. Not only hardware, but surgery and TMR, where transferring nerves, etc. So there is lots of change out there. I think this is probably the most significant, though, in terms of its impact, and this is the use of microprocessor knees. And these joints that they've been mentioned and referred before lunch, but it's just there. I think it's the you've got this brain within the joint doing the thinking for you. And some patients will describe it as an alien in my knee, and I don't like that sort of conflict. But as I see it, what these joints, what these products provide, and what is their benefit in terms of that bottom bullet? I think it's safety and security. And so if we look at the crafting, the fitting of a socket, there's lots of hope needed from what we do in prosthetic rehabilitation. So as a prosthetist, if you can provide comfort and better control, great. This new technology of intuitive joints that do some thinking, that provide that security and safety. The biggest fear to any transfemoral above knee amputee would be descending that slope where your load is falling behind the knee, because any detection of knee flexion is that the knee's about to dive on you. These joints are just designed they're designed using normal biomechanics and interpolation through a computer, through a chip. So I do think there is a benefit. The difficulty is just the extreme cost that this hardware is put into the market at. I will leave you with that slide. That's my last slide. And well, David, we were looking this week in our sort of patient diary, and this chap David was our patient 001, so one of our first patients. Very sadly died 4 weeks ago as a result of a brain tumour. Anyway, that probably says the relationship we build up and that word of trust between patient and prosthetist.
Thank you so much, Richard. And I think relationships are really important. And today's important. The relationships that you're building today are important. And how we're learning and feeling is important. It's not about just science, it's about humanity. And I think that's super important. Now we're just going to juggle the programme a little before coffee, because I know that Richard and Rajiv both have to fly on a plane very soon. And we're so grateful. I can't believe that we've got them both to come. So just if you have any questions, if you'd like to come up together, and then if there's anything anyone would like to ask or say.